For more than 1,000 years, Constantinople stood between continents, faiths, and empires. Its walls guarded the gateway between Europe and Asia, while its harbors watched over the waters of the Bosporus and the Golden Horn. To many, it seemed eternal, a city of domes, towers, markets, churches, and imperial memory. But by the middle of the 15th century, the Byzantine Empire was only a shadow of what it had once been. The empire that had ruled across seas and provinces was now reduced mostly to its ancient capital. Constantinople remained magnificent, but beneath its beauty was a city tired, isolated, and dangerously alone. Across the walls stood a young Ottoman ruler with a vast ambition. Sultan Mehmed II believed that taking Constantinople would prove his power and reshape history. To him, the city was more than a prize. It was the missing center of his growing empire, and he was determined to claim it. Inside the city, Emperor Constantine XI faced the last test of Byzantium. He knew the defenders were few, the empire was weak, and outside help was uncertain. Still, he chose resistance. For him, surrendering Constantinople meant surrendering the last living symbol of Rome in the East. The city's greatest strength was its legendary land wall. The Theodosian Walls had stopped armies for centuries, rising in layers of stone, towers, and defensive lines. They had survived siege after siege, and many believed they could not be broken. But the world of warfare was changing. Within Constantinople, the mood grew heavy. Citizens gathered in streets, churches, and squares, hoping for rescue from the west. Merchants, clergy, soldiers, and families listened for news, but each day brought more fear. The city still prayed like an empire, but it waited like a fortress under sentence. Outside the walls, the Ottoman army spread across the landscape. Tents, horses, wagons, engineers, infantry, and artillery crews filled the fields. This was not a simple raid. It was a carefully organized siege, built to surround, pressure, and exhaust the city from every side. Among the most terrifying sights was the Great Cannon. Its enormous barrel had to be dragged into place with ropes, animals, wooden supports, and hundreds of workers. It represented a new kind of threat, not just soldiers at the walls, but gunpowder power aimed directly at ancient stone. In April 1453, the siege began in full. Ottoman forces tightened around Constantinople by land, while ships watched the surrounding waters. The defenders took their positions along the walls, and the city became a world enclosed by fear. From that moment, every sunrise brought the possibility of disaster. Then the cannons spoke. Their blasts shook the air and sent smoke rolling across the battlefield. Stones cracked, towers trembled, and dust rose from walls that had stood for centuries. Each impact reminded the defenders that the old age of fortress walls was now meeting the new age of artillery. Yet the defenders did not give up. On the walls, they carried stones, timber, baskets of earth, shields, and weapons. They repaired broken places by day and by night. Exhausted soldiers watched the enemy lines below, knowing that every damaged section could become the path into the city. At the harbor, another defense guarded the Golden Horn. A massive chain stretched across the water, blocking enemy ships from entering the protected inlet. Behind it, Byzantine vessels and harbor walls seemed secure. For a moment, the city still controlled one of its most important lifelines. But Mehmed answered with a move that stunned the defenders. Ottoman crews dragged ships over land on greased logs and wooden rollers, hauling them across the hills toward the Golden Horn. What had seemed impossible became reality. The harbor defense had been outflanked, and the city felt the pressure tighten. Inside Constantinople, fear moved through the streets. Smoke rose beyond rooftops, markets closed, and churches filled with worried faces. The sounds of bombardment and siege work became part of daily life. People looked toward the walls, wondering how long stone, courage, and prayer could hold together. Mehmed increased the pressure from every direction. His army surrounded the land walls, his artillery struck again and again, and his ships threatened the waters. The siege was no longer one attack, but a tightening ring. Constantinople was slowly being cut away from hope. The crisis also tested the soul of the city. Clergy, nobles, soldiers, and citizens argued, prayed, and searched for unity. Some hoped for a miracle. Others looked to diplomacy. But the city had reached a point where politics, faith, and survival were all trapped behind the same walls. As the final assault approached, the defenders prepared for the night ahead. Weapons were distributed, barricades were strengthened, and damaged walls were reinforced one last time. No one knew exactly where the decisive blow would fall, but everyone understood that the next attack could decide the fate of the city. That night, Constantinople turned to prayer. In candlelit churches, soldiers and civilians stood together beneath icons and ancient stone. The city that had watched centuries pass now faced its last hours as the capital of Byzantium. Silence, fear, and faith filled the darkness before dawn. Before sunrise, the final assault began. Ottoman troops advanced toward the walls with ladders, shields, torches, and banners. Smoke drifted in the blue half-light as defenders crowded the battlements above. The attack came in waves, each one pushing the city closer to collapse. At last, the walls began to fail. A breach opened through broken stone and choking dust. Soldiers surged toward the gap while defenders tried desperately to hold the line. In that moment, Constantinople's greatest protection became a doorway into the city itself. According to tradition, Constantine XI fought with the final defenders as the city fell around him. The emperor was no longer simply a ruler on a throne. He became a soldier among soldiers, standing in the ruins of his capital as the last light of Byzantium faded. On May 29, 1453, Constantinople fell. Ottoman forces entered through shattered walls and gates, while smoke rose across the city. The fall ended more than 1,000 years of Byzantine imperial history. One of the most famous capitals in the world had changed hands forever. After the conquest, Mehmed entered the city not only as a victor, but as the ruler of a new imperial center. Constantinople would become a heart of Ottoman power, its monuments transformed, its streets repopulate, and its history carried into a new chapter. The fall of Constantinople was more than the end of a siege. It marked the end of the Byzantine Empire and the beginning of a new age in war, politics, trade, and memory. The city survived, but the world around it had changed. Subscribe to the channel and join the History Storytellers for cinematic history documentaries and journeys into the past.